chords, 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 chords. The wide world of musical chords can be an overwhelming place. In part one of this series, we discovered 5 tips for diving right in and learning some chords. In part 2, you were introduced to 7 steps to demystify chords. In part 3, we'll explore how chords interact with melodies, citing specific examples from familiar tunes found in the book First 50 Songs You Should Play on the Ukulele by Hal Leonard Publishing. A link to the book is posted in the description. Melody has been defined as a sequence of single notes that is musically satisfying. How satisfying that sequence of notes is largely depends on the melody's interaction with chords or harmony. Understanding some of the possible ways a melody can interact with chords can help us as we try to make arrangements of existing songs more satisfying. This knowledge can also help anyone add interest to their own original music. Way number 1, chord molding. The simplest way for a melody to interact with chords is for the melody to agree completely with the chords and vice versa. That simply means that every melody note belongs to the chord currently being expressed and that the chords never conflict with the melody in any way. I'm going to call this chord molding, though I'm sure there's a more technical term for it somewhere related to homophony or homorhythm. Now, imagine watching a show or a play in which everyone got along all the time, where all the characters were perfectly agreeable with each other. No conflict, no resolution, just peaceful and blissful coexistence. There are certainly worthy and magnificent musical traditions that share a similar musical aesthetic. Some ambient electronic music, meditative music, certain strains of modern minimalism, some hymns, folk and choral music, Tuvan throat singing, etc. Chord molding occurs in some popular songs as well, but it doesn't usually last that long. Popular music generally follows a more conflict-driven aesthetic. Way 2, passing tones and Edelweiss. The closest we'll come to chord molding today is with Edelweiss, the folk-inspired tune from Rodgers and Hammerstein's The Sound of Music that plays the fictional role of a sort of Austrian national anthem. The opening strains of the song clearly outline the given chords, but after just 5 short measures, the tune breaks away and employs one of the simplest and most commonly used devices to add interest to a melody, passing tones. Passing tones are exactly what they sound like. You start out on a chord tone, then step up or down until you reach another chord tone. Listen. Edelweiss, Edelweiss. So far we're chord molding, as every pitch in the melody belongs to the chord being played. The breakaway occurs in the second phrase. Every morning you greet me. We have an E on the morn, which agrees with the A minor chord. But then the melody steps up to an F and then to a G. These are our passing tones, which do not belong to the A minor chord. The phrase completes as it lands on an A note, which is now a part of the D minor chord. So that's an example of passing tones. If you start looking, you'll find similar examples traveling up and down the scale to chords in all kinds of music. Way number 3, neighbor tones and Boulevard of Broken Dreams. Neighbor tones are another simple way for melodies to interact with chords. With neighbor tones, the melody steps up or down away from the chord and then returns back to the same note it came from. The first measures of Boulevard of Broken Dreams contain examples of both upper and lower neighboring tones, as well as the passing tones and chord molding we've already discussed. I walk a lonely road, the only one that I have ever known. Notice that there's a passing tone from the E minor to the G chord, followed by some chord molding on the G, and then we get a series of neighbor tones. Two that dip below the D chord, only to return, and then one that steps up from the A chord and then comes back again. This use of upper and lower neighbor tones not only strengthens the melody by adding moments of tension that quickly resolve, but supports the theme of the lyrics, in which the singer is meandering down a lonely road. This phrase is actually repeated 10 times in the course of the song, which adds up to 30 neighbor tones, not counting the ones that are in the choruses. So we're sure to feel that uneasy wandering in the course of this song. Of course, this isn't the only way to use neighbor tones. They can be bouncy, cheerful, in a different context, but they really work here for Boulevard of Broken Dreams. All right, way number 4. Anticipating tones and blowing in the wind. Anticipations are the principal melodic device in Blowin' in the Wind, Dylan's famous ballad of unanswered questions. Yes, there are a few passing tones and a couple of instances of chord molding, but what really drives the song forward are the anticipations. An easy way to think of an anticipation is a note that arrives before its chord does. The melody steps up or down to a neighboring note, but instead of going back as with a neighbor tone, it hangs on, and the chord changes to include the note. Blowin' in the Wind has over a dozen anticipations for each verse. It is a highly anticipated song. Some theorists would call these syncopations, but I think anticipation is more in keeping with the feel of what is really happening here in the music. To me, a syncopation is about groove, where an anticipation is about drive. How many roads must a man walk down before you call him a man? Whether you choose to call these anticipations or syncopations, we've already had 4 of them in the first phrase of music. Let me try that without the anticipations. How many roads must a man walk down before you call him a man? Honestly, I think that pretty much steals any forward motion this song has. Okay, way number 5, escape tones and feelin' groovy. Imagine standing on the edge of a diving board, leaping up into the air, turning and falling headfirst, and merging with the water below. I never was a great diver, but that's the image that comes to my mind when I think of escaping tones. Escape tones usually step up away from a chord and then leap down to become part of another chord. They can do the reverse, step down and leap up, but that is somewhat of a rarity. In the beloved Simon & Garfunkel tune, the 59th Street Bridge song, Feelin' Groovy, an escape tone is first employed in the phrase kicking down the cobblestones. The bowl of cobblestones steps up from the A minor 7 and then leaps down to become part of the G chord. The same motif returns in the second verse on Ain't you got no rhymes for me? Right? So you can hear that. In this song, the emotional effect is a step up in tension followed by a lazy sort of falling into relaxation. I love it. Way number 6, linear escape tones, and I'd like to teach the world to sing. I came up with the term linear escape tones as a way to address a phenomenon that happens a lot in pop and pentatonic-based melodies that isn't addressed in classical study of non-harmonic tones. In these melodic moves, you step up and then leap, or leap and then step in the same direction. With pentatonic melodies, this really is just 2 steps in the same direction. as theoretically the note between them doesn't really exist in that scale, which is why this carries over into pop music so very well. A song with a lot of this going on is I'd Like to Teach the World to Sing. I'd like to build a world, a home, and furnish it with love. Grow apple trees and honey bees. There's so many of these step, leap, leap steps back and forth in just these opening lines that I don't really think any further explanation is necessary. You find the same kind of thing in traditional spirituals and folk songs so much. If you're trying to go for that swinging, folksy feel in your own music, this is a good melodic technique to employ. Way 7. Suspended tones and hallelujah. Oh, how I love a good suspension. To me, suspensions are the bread and butter way to evoke longing in melodies. A suspension holds onto a note from the last chord and then resolves down by step. In the climactic moment of Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, a suspension closes out the phrase before the more subdued and melancholy chorus. It goes like this: the fourth, the fifth, the minor fall, the major lift, the baffled king composing hallelujah. Did you hear it? It lasts for only a moment, but that suspension on hallelujah is gut-wrenching and great songwriting. Way number 8. Slowed tones and the rainbow connection. Theorists often call the opposite of a suspension a retardation, but I like slowed tones better. As a description, slowed tones hold onto a note from a chord and then resolve up, rather than an effect of disappointed longing, pain, or sighing. Slowed tones almost have the opposite effect, a feeling of new life, hopefulness rising from the depths. A good example of this is found in the opening lines of the Rainbow Connection. Why are there so many songs about rainbows? While there is a lot of cool things going on in this first phrase, the slowed tone happens on the word rainbows, rainbows, and you can definitely feel that lift. Way number 9, Appoggiaturas and leaving on a jet plane. An appoggiatura is similar to a suspension, except the melody leaps into the dissonance instead of hanging on to it, and then resolves downward by step. The same kinds of effects you get with a suspension are possible with an appoggiatura, only even more dramatic. The opening line for John Denver's Leaving on a Jet Plane leaves the listener in no doubt that we're in for a turbulent and stormy trip rather than a pleasure cruise. All my bags are packed, I'm ready to go. I'm standing here outside your door. I hate to wake you. Every time you leap into that F note on a C chord, it feels like a nail in the heart. And that's good. An amazing song. Way number 10. Freeform and Hey Soul Sister. All these theoretic models of how melodies behave are good and useful, but there are times when a song breaks down the rules and defies this kind of analysis. I found this happening a lot in songs with repetitive chord progressions. Because the chords repeat over and over in a predictable pattern that is very short, listeners are able to allow melody writers a lot more leeway in what they are willing to accept as a strong melody. Take the chorus of Hey Soul Sister. It's kind of amazing that you have 4 notes in a row that don't belong to the underlying chord before you finally resolve down to a harmonic note. It doesn't follow any of the above models. The closest I can come to describing it is as a chord over a chord, or some kind of super suspension. It's cool and it works. It's great songwriting. The moral of the story being that if it sounds good, go ahead. You can only find these kinds of things by playing around, so play around. If you've enjoyed these ideas on chord melody interaction and find them helpful, please remember to hit the thumbs up, tap the subscribe button and bell icons to get notifications when additional tips and tutorials are uploaded, including more videos on exploring that vast ocean of chords. Don't forget to share a comment below if a great example of one of these chord melody interactions has popped into your head during this presentation. You never know who might be inspired by hearing your thoughts and about your experiences. Lastly, please consider supporting this project and getting a boatload of Patron exclusives at patreon.com/uke. A big thank you to all my supporters there.